Rangsk has changed the face of the Sudoku setting and solving hobby in a way that not many of us can say that we have. The first time I used his solver and his user scripts in F puzzles, I was actually blown away by the possibilities for technically complex puzzle setting that would have been unrealistic to do by hand before then. Rangsk and I have also worked together on the Sudoku Adventure series and on SudokuCon, and I have been continually impressed by how high his standards are in even areas that are not directly related to puzzles, things like audio and video production, and just keeping a consistently level demeanor and being a really good and important community member. I am very, very glad that Rangsk ended up getting interested in puzzles because I think he is a very good person to have in this community.
Hi, this is Riff Clown. Rangsk is one of those folks that when I first came to the community, it struck me as helpful, smart, and approachable. Over the last 3 years, I've come to respect just how big of an impact he has made on the community as a whole. His willingness to engage on issues and produce tools that literally impact every setter I know is profoundly appreciated in this world we call Sudoku. Thank you, Rangsk.
Ranks loves sharing his knowledge. He loves learning new things and then sharing his enthusiasm for those new things with everybody around him. He's never arrogant. He's never a know it all. He's always just a great guy. And I'm not just saying that because he's my brother. I think he really opened the door for a lot of other people to spin off puzzling YouTube channels and to start setting their own puzzles. And he just really enjoys the community aspect and wants everybody to love all things Sudoku as much as he does.
When it comes to showing support for the Sudoku community, it's hard to think of anyone who has done more work in that regards than Rangsk. From creating amazing puzzles, showcasing amazing puzzles, having a channel where everyone is welcome, building communities with the Puzzle Plaza, writing software to make it easier for people to set and create and test puzzles. Everything that Rangsk has done over the last few years has been community driven and made everything that has happened in the Sudoku community possible. I don't think there is a single person in the community who has done more work or has driven the benefits that we've seen more.
Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome. We have Ranks today. How are you doing, Ranks?
Much better than earlier. I'm just getting over being sick.
Yeah, sorry about having to move the stream, but Ranks was sick, so we had to do it, and uh, it's no worries because we're doing it now, and it's all good. We have exciting announcements. If you didn't see the post, go check that out. Several things. First of all, 5 more interviews. Second of all, Ranks stream moved. Hope you figured that out because we're here. New shorts coming, new things going on, so check that out. And yeah, if you also want to check out Ranks, he has his own YouTube. So check that out in the description after you're done watching this interview. And let's jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you do for work, Ranks?
For work, I am a software engineer. I work for a university lab that studies cognition, both like auditory, visual, as well as memory, things like that. And so I work on software that assists with that research.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that you were at a university. Uh, the more you
Yeah,
learn.
I find it really fulfilling. I used to be in the game industry,
Mhm.
and that wasn't as fulfilling for me, especially the state of the game industry right now. So also they work you so much there. I got
Right.
very burnt out. Um, and so I'm really enjoying working for a university where not only do I have a good work-life balance where I'm able to do my content and all that, as well as working, but I also feel very fulfilled in the kind of work that I'm doing.
Sweet. Is there for the other software engineers out there, is there a particular coding language that you prefer?
Well, for work, I do use mostly C Sharp because we work with Unity engine. Um, for personal stuff, I will use C Sharp, like the Sudoku solver I wrote that a lot of people use is written in C Sharp. Um, I've really gotten into Rust recently. Really enjoy Rust. I used to really like C++. It was kind of my language of choice, but now I kind of replaced that with Rust.
Interesting. I haven't gotten into Rust yet. We have to check that out. How do you balance puzzling with your other things in life?
Good question. So a lot of it has to do with scheduling and time tracking, which I've been trying to do more and more of because I do produce a lot of content. I don't really do much puzzling outside of when I'm sitting in front of a camera. Um, it's just kind of just if I'm going to do the puzzle, I feel like I should record it. I do some on the side every once in a while, but most of the things I solve, you're seeing on my channel.
I think that's a
But
very
beyond that,
unique problem that I think some Sudoku streamers have is the puzzling guilt. You're like, why am I not recording this? I'm solving something. Why am I not recording it? I felt that as well, so it's funny.
and as a content creator in general, I've really tried suppressing the thought of I'm doing anything, I should be recording myself.
Hmm.
I have to try to balance that because it's
Yeah.
like, do I start vlogging? Right? I'm sure
Right.
people would watch it, but like, I kind of just want to live my life. I don't want to be videoing everything that I eat or like everywhere that I go or, oh, I'm
Yeah.
at the beach. Should I vlog? I'm trying to avoid that sort of mindset and instead just focus on this, I'm making content right now. Okay, I'm not making content right now.
Yeah, I think that's a healthy attitude.
I hope so.
If you were to be interviewed on a different topic, what topic would you choose?
Oh, I didn't really announce this enough. I kind of slipped through the cracks. I got kind of sick around the time it was released. I've been sick a lot. But I did a podcast interview with it's actually a podcast that's part of Salesforce, although I didn't talk about Salesforce at all. But basically what we talked about was a lot of how solving puzzles can also kind of improve your life in different ways,
Hmm.
and how the critical thinking skills you gain in the what's kind of the good word for that? It's kind of the low stakes environment of solving puzzles. You sort
Yeah.
of gain ways of critical thinking and handling failure and knowing your limits and things like that in kind of a safe space, which then when you're presented with that at a more critical time, you have that to lean on. And I really enjoyed that conversation that I had on that podcast. So I think that was quite enjoyable. I like talking about life and fulfillment and how to approach problem solving and things like that, just in general.
Hmm. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
I've gotten very into Brandon Sanderson books, the Cosmere, and there's a line uh, from Oathbringer, which is what is the most important step a man can take, and it's always the next one. The next step is always the most important one. So you keep moving, and that really resonated with me, and I think it resonates with a lot of people. So I think that's a good one.
Good answer. Logan had asked what inspired your username, Ranks.
Oh well, that's a fun story. It may be a little bit of a disappointing story, but I guess uh, some backstory there. So I invented the name. I think I was around 14 years old. I think it was 1998 when StarCraft 1 was released. So um, previous to that, I was playing like the Warcraft 2, and they didn't really have their own online service for that. And so when I got StarCraft, they wanted me to make a BattleNet account, which was kind of a new thing for playing StarCraft. And so you needed a username. And previously, I had been using a hero from Warcraft 2 as my username. I think it was Gul'dan, and I wanted a hero from StarCraft to use. And so I opened the manual and I went down the list of heroes and I tried every single one. Of course, naively not understanding the number of people who were making accounts and that they would all be taken. And so what I did is I took the first. I didn't know anything about these heroes. I had not played the game yet. I was literally making an account in order to play the game. And so The first one in the manual is Raynor, and the second one in the manual is Mensk. And I just smushed them together as a portmanteau. And I did not expect that this name would stick with me for the rest of my life, but there we are. It's never taken, so I just use it when I need an online handle, and have since I was 14. Like when Google, people started inviting people to Gmail and things like that, I picked that as well, things like that. So that's why that became the name of my YouTube account, which then I just used when I started making content. Again, not expecting that it would sort of
Right.
associate with me that strongly, but I'm fine with it. I don't mind the name.
What's your favorite childhood memory? Or what's a favorite childhood memory, I guess?
Favorite. I have this problem where like I feel like I just existed as a child and didn't form a whole lot of memories, which is unfortunate. But I do remember that this fun story though, which my sister likes to tell as well, which is we did a cross country drive. It took us about 10 days to drive from California to Philadelphia. And we stopped at the Grand Canyon because we basically planned out trips. I was very young. I don't remember exactly how old, but I had this Ninja Turtle camera back when it was film cameras, and it was it was themed on Ninja Turtles. But every picture you took, it would put a little Ninja Turtle watermark on the bottom right of the pictures. I was 5, according to Jessica. And so I was taking pictures, and Jessica says to me, "David, take a picture of the landscape." And I look around and I go, "Okay, where's the landscape?" Because I didn't know what that word meant. I thought she meant there was a specific building or something to take a picture of, but we were literally just standing looking at the Grand Canyon. So
That's pretty funny.
yeah.
Are you more of a morning person or more of a night owl?
I'm a hybrid person. Like I feel like I know that if I sleep naturally without an alarm, I do not keep a 24-hour schedule. And so with like over summer breaks when I would have nothing to do, I would literally just like rotate when I was sleeping. You would never know. And so I have a hard time keeping to a 24-hour schedule is really kind of the answer to that. And so it sometimes I'm like for actually quite a significant amount of time recently, probably about at least 4 weeks, if not longer, I was going to bed at like 5 or 6 p.m. and waking up at like midnight, and then just being up until I went to bed again. And that was like the most sustainable schedule I've ever had, which was weird. um, and luckily, I do have a hybrid work schedule, and so I just have to be up during a 4-hour block for meetings, and then I can just work when I need to for the rest of the 4 hours on that day. So it's been very good for me because I have a very hard time keeping a consistent schedule.
Weird question about that. Are you
Okay.
epileptic?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay, interesting.
As far as I know, I don't have any specific like medical condition that causes it. I think it's just sort of me.
I was just thinking of back in university days when I was going to lots of talks, and there was one on epilepsy and the circadian rhythm and how it's very different for epileptic people. Like it's just completely a different schedule. So I was just curious if there's a manifestation of that. My sister is epileptic, and she is also a similar way as you. So curious. Anyways,
It's interesting that those are linked. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Epilepsy is very, very interesting for the cognition and that sort of area. But anyways, let's get on before we get into a wormhole of that conversation.
We could talk about that forever, but I'm sure there's other things people want to hear about.
Let's get into puzzles. So what was the first puzzle that you ever decided to set?
Yeah, so it was a non-consecutive puzzle with just givens. And that actually, it's an interesting question because it spawned my desire to create my own solver. This would have been back in probably 2019. And I wanted to set a non-consecutive, and I was having a lot of trouble because, as you probably know, non-consecutive is extremely uh, constrained. Um, constraint. It doesn't have that many solutions to start with compared to classic, and so I was having a lot of trouble getting that set properly. And so um, this is kind of where my whole tooling started. And it was just intended to be like a one-off, like I'm just going to write a quick program to help me set this one puzzle. And then as I set more puzzles, I ended up reusing that code and making it more generic. And at some point I said, I need to integrate this with F puzzles. And I looked into how I might do that. And then I was like, okay, if I clean this up and make it even more generic, then other people could benefit. And that's when I ended up releasing it. It took me about 9 months of work to get that into a state where I was willing to release it. But
That's a very interesting uh, origin for the fpuzzle script.
yeah,
How much work is it to keep up with that whole integration?
honestly, I haven't been doing a whole lot of work with it recently. I've been meaning to do like I've had this development version of it that I keep encouraging people to use over the released version,
Yeah.
which I've been developing it for probably 2 years now without doing a new release. Um, and it's just I haven't had the confidence to say, okay, this one's good enough to call a release. I always feel like I run into little small problems with it, but really it's about sitting down and getting that done. So my focus has mostly just been elsewhere. I've also been focusing on trying to basically make it obsolete by
Mm.
writing a JavaScript version of the solver that can be integrated directly with the new fpuzzles version. So that's been a focus as well. But honestly, like with the amount of time I spend already just on my content, I haven't had a whole lot of time for personal projects, unless they're very short, like one-off projects.
And I also wanted to ask about I guess, the adoption of the solver into the setting hobby, because when I came into the setting hobby, it was just like a thing. Like everyone knew, oh, you download Rank Solver and then you use it in F puzzles. But how did that, was it slow to get going, or was everyone just like, oh, there's this solver, like, holy crap, we can use this now?
It got adopted pretty quickly because it was a significant improvement over the tooling that was available at the time. I think nowadays there are a couple there's competition for it. And
Hmm.
so it's not like I think some people are moving away from it because of the more ergonomic tools that are available, which is why I want to work on the new F puzzles version as well. But yeah, I mean, at the time, like F puzzles, it's still like if you use vanilla F puzzles, I don't know the last time you've used it without any of the user scripts, it's got problems, right? It's kind
Hmm.
of frustrating to use. It's slow. It doesn't have features you might be used to, like true candidates. So I think I sort of breathed new life into F puzzles with the various user scripts I was writing and the replacement solver and stuff like that. And it was really the only thing available as a setting tool. And so it was just word of mouth spread very, very quickly. I don't have any metrics on how many people are actually using it. Like I never built in any kind of like telemetry or anything. So I actually have no idea the number of people who use it, except just what I see on Discord where people talk about it. So
Hmm. And was one of those competition sites, what was it? I think it was Sudoku Lab that you were also involved with. Is that right?
I was not involved in Sudoku Lab. That was created by someone who uh, was a member of the Discord server for a bit, and then he disappeared. I'm sure he just moved on to other things. But I don't remember his handle, and I apologize for that. But he created Sudoku Lab, and I think one thing that was nice about Sudoku Lab was your ability to use it for mobile, and the solver was very nice as well and built in JavaScript, so you could use it. Um, so it was a nice alternative to F puzzles with my scripts because you could do it on mobile and you didn't need all this additional setup to use it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think early on, that was one of the barriers of getting people into setting, was setting up all like a script to be able to use Renban, for example, or German whispers in a puzzle.
Yeah, you still do.
Exactly. Yeah.
For F puzzles, you still do, at least. I know Sudoku Maker has been very popular because it just kind of works out of the box, very ergonomic, custom constraints, things like that. So
Let's go back to the first puzzle briefly. I got up on screen. It's run free, right? I didn't get the wrong one.
yeah, I think that's it. So this was actually an investigation into roping. And that's why it's called run free, because it is not roped. So non-consecutive Sudoku has an extremely high probability for an individual band to be roped, to the point where Mark, Mark Goodliff, I'm sure you know who that is. he speculated in a non-consecutive video, I wonder if non-consecutive must be roped. And that's when I wrote my solver to investigate that. And so I was investigating, okay, must it be roped? And if it's not, what percentage of puzzles are roped? And I gathered a bunch of statistics. I was able to do so because I realized there were only 11 million solutions to non-consecutive. So I could literally just list them all out and do an analysis on every solution. And so then what I wanted to do is I wanted to take one of the grids that had no roping at all and then create a puzzle out of that. And so I took that solved grid and I figured out how to provide certain givens to make it a nice solve.
Interesting. Would you say that's not at all how you set a puzzle these days?
No, not at all. So I started setting with a lot of tooling assistance. I was playing a lot with global constraints, especially non-consecutive. So I played a bit with diagonal non-consecutive, which never really caught on, probably because there's no button in F puzzles for it. And it's really hard to set for otherwise. But instead of the orthogonally adjacent digits being non-consecutive, it's the diagonally adjacent digits that are non-consecutive. Obviously, you can't combine both because then the center digit would remove 2 digits from every other cell in the box. But yeah, so I actually wrote a few diagonal non-consecutives, which again, I used my solver for. And what I generally do is I would take a solved grid, reduce it to its minimum givens, which is usually around 4. And then I would try to solve it. And then as I tried to solve it, I would then get stuck because you can't solve, even though it's unique with 4 givens, there's no way to solve it as a human. And so I would get stuck and then I would go, okay, what given can I add from the solution that will get me unstuck? And that's how I would make solve paths with these puzzles.
That's a very, I don't think I've ever heard of that specific like route of making a puzzle. It's a very unique one.
It's very much driven from a software developer point of view. And it's not how I set puzzles these days. I use probably a more traditional route
Right.
with, pick constraints that are very, that aren't as but there's a word I'm looking for where the constraint is not very restrictive.
Right. Yeah.
And then you just sort of solve as you, it's still kind of a solve as you go thing, but it's a lot more flexible because, you add the clues and then, you see how that solves so far. And then you go, okay, how do I reward what was just found? What's a cool clue I can add to reward that? And you just repeat that until the puzzle is solvable.
Right. So how did you first get into variant Sudoku? Was it CTC?
It was indeed CTC, yeah. So I actually got into Sudoku, classic Sudoku, back when it was a huge craze. And I never remember the year, but it was probably around 2008, if I had to guess.
Something like that.
Yeah, there was just a huge Sudoku craze. And of course, I got caught up in that. And the way I would solve Sudoku at the time was I would go cell by cell and write out all the candidates. And then I would look for singles and pairs. And that was basically the extent of the strategies I knew. And I got bored of it pretty fast, as you might imagine, solving that way. Which is actually why I have a series now. Here's how to solve Sudoku in a way that you'll actually enjoy it. I apologize for the cough. I just put in a new cough drop, so hopefully that'll
no worries.
throat will be better.
Everyone, I think, understands.
But then that just ran out, and so it probably I don't even know if it lasted till 2009, right? And And so then I just sort of forgot about Sudoku. Even at the time, I had actually written a Sudoku solver. It was actually kind of it was kind of fun. I didn't know very many strategies. I knew about pairs, I think. I think I had figured it out myself, and I was very proud of myself for figuring out what a pair was, and naked singles, of course. And although I didn't know the names of them, I wasn't really going on forums or anything like looking at strategy, just what I'd figured out myself. And so I wrote a solver that could produce Sudoku puzzles by taking a solved grid and removing givens until it was unique. And then it would try to solve it using the strategies that I employed, which were just singles and pairs. And then it would rate how difficult the puzzle was. And I would run that overnight and it would spit out a bunch of puzzles. And then I would try to solve them myself. So even then I was doing Sudoku solvers. But anyway, CTC just showed up on my recommended feed like probably mid 2019. And I was like, oh, Sudoku. That's not a Sudoku I've seen before. And I clicked it and I, watched it. And I think probably I didn't watch another CTC video for another probably 3 or 4 months. But by late 2019, I was basically watching CTC every day.
So that would be like before the crazy boom.
It was before the pandemic, and it was before Miracle. Yeah. So I guess I'm a CTC early adopter, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. You're an OG. So when did you end up writing these scripts in this timeline here that we're creating?
That would be late 2019 is when I started. So you had Run Free brought up. I don't remember. What's the release date of Run Free, I wonder? That would be like the early. That would be kind of the solver existed in its earliest form around the time I released Run Free.
I got it from the CTC Discord archive, and the date on the solve counter does not make any sense. So someone else might be able to look that up and tell us, but
yeah,
if I look at Discord right now, then
I'll do it.
You will go away.
Yes, I won't go away if I look at it. So let's just see. Okay, Run Free was, okay, so maybe my dates are a bit off here. Run Free was released almost November 2020.
Oh.
So, yeah, maybe, that actually, I was misremembering the year then. I did start watching CTC in 2019, but it wasn't until late 2020 that I started setting and started working on the solver simultaneously.
And was it just the comment about roping and non-consecutive that you were like, I need to figure out what's going on with this?
That might have been it. It's just kind of interesting, like cool. A little offhand comment from Mark Goodliff. The butterfly effects are kind of crazy to think about.
So when do you think you started finding your stride as a setter? Like, what was an important puzzle in your development as a setter?
I would say I did I think the culmination of kind of that early setting process that we were talking about was what's the name of the puzzle? But it was a diagonal non-consecutive that just had it was diagonal anti-crop key with like a single crop key dot and a thermo. That was it. Or something along those lines. Here, let me see if I can find it. Do you have that one ready to go? Or yeah, see, it's on the bottom right of your image of your background of your stream.
Oh yeah. Where is that one? I have all your puzzles up and ready to go. Just need to find it.
Yeah, so it's called 2 degrees. Yeah, so it's got a black dot, a white dot.
Oh, it's on LMD.
And it's diagonal crop key.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. First puzzle on LMD. There we go.
Yeah. So the maybe surprising, maybe not surprising thing is that this puzzle is unique without those thermos. But you can't solve it without the thermos. So my setting was basically running a computer search for, can I place very few dots and have a unique diagonal anti-crop key? Anti-crop key is so restricted, and diagonal anti-crop key is about the same. Like there's only like a few thousand solutions to it. Maybe 8,000 if I remember right, 8 to 9,000 total. And so those two dots were enough to make it unique, but it's not solvable by a human, as far as I know. Not this human. And so the setting process was finding those two dots and then finding a way to like, what's the best way for me to give some initial constraints to make it solvable. So that's where I really I feel like I really got my stride there in terms of like feeling confident. And this did get featured by CTC. It wasn't my first feature though. I believe my first feature was the non-consecutive diagonal puzzle with arrows. Mark featured that one. So that was my second puzzle ever, which is not on LMD. I'm very bad at publishing my Sudokus anywhere.
That's okay. I got them all up. Got them all ready to go.
You got them all ready. There it is. So that's my second puzzle ever. Again, I was experimenting with diagonal non-consecutive. And so I was like, what diagonal things can I put there to make it interesting? So you've got those arrows and you've got the little killers. I even used a pill arrow.
You don't see those very often anymore. How did it?
No,
Yeah. I was going to ask, how did it feel to get that feature on your second puzzle?
Oh, it felt amazing. Yeah. And in fact, Mark would pretty consistently feature my puzzles as I submitted them, which was a really great feeling. So if I submitted a puzzle, Mark would feature it. I've only had one Simon feature ever, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think I noticed that. Which one was that again?
It must have been a Region Sumline puzzle.
Yes, it was. It was equal sums.
Yeah. So I kind of get credit for inventing the constraint, even though I didn't.
I remember this.
And I always push back against people saying that I invented it. I would say that I probably popularized it, probably because I added it to my solver. When any constraint I added to my solver would just suddenly get a slew of puzzles, and then I would be responsible for popularizing it. So I'd see the constraint on CTC, and I'd go, "Oh, that sounds like fun. I want to try setting a puzzle with it." So then I would add it to my solver so that I could, and then I'd release it so anyone else could use it. So yeah, I think this equal sums puzzle that you have up right now, that one was probably my first one that I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of a new way of setting that I'm really enjoying. I think the only one before that I would say would fit the bill is Killer Blister, which is a little killer puzzle. That Mark did feature. And this one, the idea behind it was actually some roping tech that I had come up with that I wanted to show off. So if you look, there is in the center band, there's a 3 cage, which has to be 1, 2, and then there's a 7 cage, which has to be 1, 2, 4. And I believe I made some reason that row 4, column 1 could not be a 4. I don't remember what specifically that reason was. It's probably pretty simple.
The 20
but
cage?
Basically,
the 20.
So yeah, that cell there can't be a 4. And I don't, honestly, off the top of my head, I don't remember why. So you end up with 1, 2, not a 4, and 1, 2, 4. And so it can't be roped.
Right.
And so you end up with 1, 2 being forced into the 10 cage, and you're not allowed to put a 4 in that row with the 10 cage. So the 10 cage is 1, 2, 3, 4, but it can't be 4. So the 4 is forced onto that 37 little killer. And so that was the idea behind my break-in, but it turns out there was a very easy bypass that I didn't see until the puzzle was in testing. And I was okay with it because I figured a lot of people wouldn't see that roping behavior because I'd kind of invented it. So I wanted to have that included as kind of like a nice nugget of, hey, this is neat if you find it. But the interaction between the 20 little killer and the 18 cage in box 1 is enough to just sort of break in and start making progress without that. But yeah, that was kind of my initial sort of placed clues were that center band.
Nowadays, do you typically test your puzzles to make sure that there's no bypasses, or are you okay with like bypasses?
I'm generally okay with bypasses unless they're like super trivialized bypasses. But I will use my solver. If my solver can't bypass it, that's usually good enough for me. My solver is not very good. But if there's just like, oh, there's just a single there, right? Like it'll tell me that.
Yeah.
And then that means that, okay, that bypass is a little too trivial. But I don't mind if I'm not really married to the idea that a puzzle needs to have a break-in that you have to hit your head against because there's no other way through. I generally target 2 or 3 star puzzles, sometimes even 1 star difficulty. Like I want my puzzles to have interesting moments, but I don't necessarily need them to be 4 or 5 star difficulty. I'd like to have that sort of broader audience who's able to solve it.
Right.
So bypasses do help with that.
So speaking of broader audience, when did we go from Sudoku setter to Sudoku streamer?
Yeah, so if we want to talk about butterfly effects here, I believe it had to have been Sam Keppelman Lines approached CTC with a puzzle he made, and he wanted to make it a contest. I don't know if anyone else remembers this, but it was a contest of, can you make a beautiful solve path of this puzzle? And I actually worked with my sister on the solve path, and we came up with a path that we really liked. It didn't end up being his intended beautiful path, so we didn't win. But I was like, instead of us making a document for this, why don't I just make a video, CTC style, demonstrating the solve path? Because I thought that might be fun to do. And so I ended up making that video, and I put it unlisted on my channel for Sam to watch. It was really only intended for Sam to watch. And then I just had a lot of fun making that video. So it's like, hey, why don't again, this was this like late 2020, early 2021? It must have been.
Yeah, I think so.
If I'm remembering right.
It's before I started setting, so definitely before 2021.
Yeah. So it's trying to jog my memory, but I decided I really liked making that Sudoku content where I just liked explaining solve paths. So there was one of 2 things. I might have started doing them simultaneously almost, which was, hey, if I'm going to set a puzzle, why don't I also record a video explaining how to solve it? And I can just include that link with the puzzle. So if someone gets stuck or they want to know like what my intent was, then they have that video that they can lean on. And that was really all my intent was just to publish that. And I think at the same time, I also started experimenting with solving other people's puzzles, kind of doing live solve style like CTC. But I was mostly focused on my own puzzles. And so then it just so happened that Mark solved one of my puzzles. And in the comments section, I said, hey, thanks for solving. By the way, on my channel, I've got my own solve video if anyone wants to see my intended solve path. And that got me 300 subscribers. I wasn't intending to have a large number of people watching my content. It was really just like documenting my own solves. But after I got 300 subs and all the nice feedback on that video, I decided, hey, why don't I just keep posting? So that's what happened. Bremster says in the chat, this is a familiar story. So
yeah, it's almost exactly what Bremster said in his interview.
Yeah.
Funny. I think we have a couple of questions on from the viewers about the streams and the channel. So let's go to one of those. Isaiah had asked, what got you into doing Sudoku streams in the first place, even though you haven't done one in a while? So I think we sort of went through that, but what about the streaming part of it?
Yeah, so I would not be able to tell you the year without just
Yeah.
referencing when my first stream happened. But I did decide to start streaming Sudoku. I think I don't want to claim to be the first to think of it or to do it, but in my mind, I would thought it was a novel idea. At least I'm pretty sure. Where I was like, "Hey, I'm making all these live solve videos. Why don't I stream?" Because I was very much in the sort of Twitch streaming scene in general. Um, a lot of watching Twitch streams and participating in them and things like that. Doing my own little off and on streams on Twitch just for gaming. And so I was like, hey, why don't I just try live streaming Sudoku and see if people want to collaboratively do that. At first, I was actually really strict about, hey, I want to solve it. Don't help me. Then that relaxed over time for sure. Where I was like, okay, this is a collaborative environment. Let's collaborate. But there definitely was sort of this culture, especially on Twitch, of like, hey, I'm playing the game. You feel free to discuss it, but please don't spoil me. Right.
Mhm.
So I kind of had that perspective when I started streaming.
Right.
And so, but yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to yell out, hey, that seven, that given seven, you've been ignoring it for 20 minutes now.
Finally, we have an outlet to scream at someone.
Exactly. And so my initial streams were 8 hours long because I had, when I was watching Twitch streams, like these Twitch streamers, they would stream like as a full-time job. They would stream 8 hours or more. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stream Sudoku for 8 hours. It actually lasted a lot longer than it should have. And I started reducing the time. I reduced it to like instead of 8 hours once a week, I did 4 hours twice a week, which was much better. Because by hour 7, trying to solve Sudoku
Yeah.
for 8 hours straight and streaming at the same time, like I was just completely gone. And so that was like a weekend thing I was doing when it was the 8-hour streams. But so yeah, that's kind of how that started. And I don't know, like I feel like it was just sort of a natural progression of my content and how I was sort of thinking about my own entertainment at the time.
Mhm.
And
I
yeah,
always
so I'm
wondered
kind of
why CTC never picked up the streaming thing.
they have done a couple streams. They definitely have that mentality of like not wanting help from the stream.
Right. Yeah.
Also, I think Simon especially is just he's I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but he has talked about him being like nervous in front of crowds and like nervous being live. Like when you're recording, you can always decide not to publish, or you can always
Sure.
decide to cut a part out. When it's live, that's a whole other thing. A lot of people just they can't handle streaming live, and I completely understand that because of the pressure to be perfect in real time is a lot. And I think you just sort of have to accept that you aren't going to be perfect. And some
Mhm.
part of the entertainment is the relatability of not being perfect, but that
Yeah.
can be difficult. And it's not even just like being egoistic about it. It's about your own, mental health at that point. Um, and so I do not recommend streaming for for most people, honestly. I'm sure you know this because you stream, but yeah, it takes it is a certain unique kind of pressure to live stream, and yeah, I've seen I would recommend dipping your toes in and trying it out if you think that's something you want to do, but then be aware that sometimes it's just not something that's for you at that moment in your life.
Mhm. All right, moving over to Logan's other question. Oh, wait. I forgot to ask Playmaker's question first.
Okay.
Do you have any personal favorite experiences from when you regularly stream puzzles?
Ooh. Do I have any personal favorite experiences from when I regularly stream puzzles? That's a tough question. I think there. I apologize for not directly answering the question because it's a difficult. Favorite things are really difficult
Yeah.
questions for me to answer. But I can say that my favorite thing about streaming puzzles was the interaction in the community and how kind everybody was and how everyone could come together and just enjoy the puzzles and the amazing puzzles that got submitted and being able to enjoy that as a community. Um, was my favorite thing about that. I think that picking out a particular moment would be really difficult. Um, just because it is all a blur to me. I haven't streamed in over a year, and just the number of puzzles I did, the number of streams I did was a lot. And so it's really hard to pick something out. But the general vibe of it, I really enjoyed. So I apologize, Playmaker, for not being able to directly answer your question, but that's the best I can come up with.
I think that's a good answer. I'm sure everyone's wondering at this point why. I'm sure this has been answered by you as well, but why did you stop streaming?
Yeah, so I initially stopped streaming because I was moving. So I moved in October from California to Colorado. It involved selling my house, buying the new house, packing, just a lot of stuff, contractors in and out.
Yeah.
And I just, because of all of that, I took a break from streaming. And that was probably around June of last year. So basically a year ago is when that really started. Like we're really like, we're trying to sell the house, we're trying to do repairs, we're trying to blah, blah, blah. And so I just stopped streaming to give myself that extra time to be able to do that. And then we moved, and then of course moving into the new place, there was contractors, and again, like it takes a really long time to really settle in. And then over that time, I figured out ways that I could still produce content without streaming, and that kind of filled my schedule. So like the content I'm making now, I'm spending 3 to 5 hours a day, usually closer to that 5-hour mark, creating my content, editing it, uploading it, and all that. And I have 8 hours a day that I work, and then 8 hours where I sleep. So where does streaming fit in there? And the answer is it doesn't really fit. If I wanted to stream, I probably would do it irregularly, which I still hope to be able to do, irregular streams. And it would have to be when I have some extra free time somehow. Um, and so having a dedicated stream schedule just it doesn't fit into what I'm doing right now without just cutting entire segments of my content.
Right. So let's talk about the other segments of your content. Logan asked, "What inspired you to become a Wordle-based TikTok nano celebrity?" Which is a funny way of asking that question.
Nano celebrity, I'll take it. So Wordle became a huge craze sometime around February of, what was that? 2020, was that 22 or 23? Anyway,
22,
whenever that big Wordle
22, I
craze hit.
think.
Yeah, 22. I think around February 22. And it was also around the same time that it was basically like YouTube Shorts. People were demonstrating the ability to just really skyrocket their channels through Shorts. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do Sudoku Shorts. I had been thinking for a long time, how do I do Sudoku Shorts? No one has solved that yet. I can do Sudoku TikToks because now I can upload 60-minute TikToks if I want to. So that's perfectly fine. But shorts are still a minute or less, under a minute. I can't do Sudoku justice in 59 seconds.
Yeah.
So I just was like, well, shorts aren't available to me. I'll just grow the normal way. Until Wordle came out, and I was like, I'm playing it anyway. I'm enjoying the game. Why don't I record Wordle and then make shorts out of that? So I started posting Wordle shorts, and they became popular. So that's kind of where that came from. And I was like, well, my Wordle shorts are popular. I'm going to keep posting Wordle shorts. And then that evolved into sort of the whole word game stuff eventually, as I was really enjoying the word game aspect of puzzling, which was kind of a new open door for me. Like Wordle
Mhm.
really opened the door to like, now I'm doing, connections and strands and crosswords and all this other stuff, which I never would have even considered myself like someone who'd enjoy that kind of thing or be good at that kind of thing previous to Wordle. So I have Wordle to thank for that and the popularity of the Wordle shorts to encourage me to expand from there.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I wouldn't have imagined that I would enjoy any type of word game, but I also do enjoy Wordle quite a bit. So
Yeah.
very, very good game.
A lot of the stuff we learn from logic puzzles translates really well to word games.
Mhm.
And I think that's why people like watching my word game solves is I approach it from a very sort of different logical perspective than a lot of people approach these games.
Yeah.
And there's all these variants that allow for more opportunity for logic as well, which I'm really enjoying.
Mhm. The other bulk of your, or the other aspect of your content, I guess, that we can talk about is the adventure series. David had asked, could you imagine when you started the adventure series that it would make it up to 500 plus and still going strong? What are you most proud of from the series?
Yeah. So do you mind if I give a little history of the series just for
Absolutely. Go ahead.
perspective? So I hate when I blank on someone's name. It was Kinnison. I'm sorry if I'm remembering the name wrong. And someone can chat can correct me. Did a advent of Sudoku, basically that December prior to when I started Adventure. Must have been 2022, right? If there's been 500 adventures. Right. And so that was 25 6x6 puzzles that he created himself that were designed to be approachable and sort of introduce you to variant Sudoku. And he did a very good job of that. And I featured it every day. So I recorded it every day and I Kinnison. Okay, so Isaiah says it was Kinnison. So and I really enjoyed producing that every day. And then they ran out, right? There weren't any more of them. And then, of course, there was the December holidays where nothing happened. But then around mid-January-ish, I had this thought of like, why don't I just get the community to help me create more 6x6s of this along the same vein? And so Adventure, the name actually comes from Advent of Sudoku.
Right, yeah.
And so that's why some of the older ones you'll see Adventure has a dash between Advent and to sort of be an homage to
Secret
Advent.
Lore.
Yeah. And so I was like, I approached RiffCloud and Skunkworks saying, hey, would you like to provide me with an infinite well of 6x6s? And they said, yes, we would love to provide you with an infinite well of 6x6s. And so people signed up to help set for that. And at first I was like, it's just going to be an irregular series, like as I get the puzzles in. But then after the first puzzle, I waited a couple days. And then from there, I just started publishing it daily because the Sudoku Adventure team just grew and there was just more and more puzzles that were available where I was confident that I could make it a daily series. Yeah. And so now I sort of have, because Sudoku Adventure has grown so much, I've created a separate server for Adventure for the Adventure setters to organize and test and all that. And so if any setter is interested in setting for Adventure, there are a couple things to agree to, just like basically my right to be able to publish it and things like that. But I'm very kind in my rules there, just enough to cover my own stuff. And so if you're interested, I can definitely invite you to the server, and you can set for Adventure as well.
Yeah, it's pretty cool series. I set my first one
Yeah,
for it the other day.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah, that's right. Hopefully many more to come.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really enjoying the adventure series. I've started posting it to TikTok as well. So I've attracted a brand new audience to Sudoku variants through that. With the occasional comment saying, "Have you heard of cracking the cryptic?" And I just have to smile at that.
No, who's Mark Goodliff?
I do try to separate my content from CTC though. I want to be a separate creator from CTC. I do think CTC is doing great things for the variant Sudoku world, but I also think that there's room for other creators that aren't part of their ecosystem. So that's what I've been trying to do.
Mm-hmm. There's so many things to cover. Next thing I have on my list is the Puzzle Plaza. How did that come about? This is story time with
Well,
Rangsk.
I love telling stories, so that's fine. If only I wasn't coughing. I wanted somewhere to give support to people who were having issues with my solver or just wanted to discuss my solver, as well as anyone who maybe wanted to contribute to the solver since it is open source. I approached the moderators of the Cracking the Cryptic community Discord, asking for a space, like a channel for myself, just like Puzzles does. And they rejected that. They said, no, we don't want more channels. So I was like, well, okay, I'll just make my own server. So I made a server and it was called Sudoku Solver because it was literally a Discord for my Sudoku solver. And I made probably way too many channels in it to really categorize what you might want to discuss about my solver. And I set all that up. And then when my content started really ramping up, I realized, hey, I need a Discord server for my content. Instead of just making a second Discord server for it, I was like, well, it's already called Sudoku Solver. That's me. I'm a Sudoku solver. So I just repurposed it to like give it a section to talk about like my solver, but then it also had a section to talk about sorry, I just saw Riff Clown say how many is too many channels. Yeah, Skunkworks probably he's the only server I'm in that has more channels than my own server. So.
Skunkworks has a lot of channels. If you haven't seen it, it's one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Anyway, so I started using it for my own content, and then I saw sort of like there were more kind of creators like Scott Strersall, who are the initial ones? Zeta Math, Bremster, I think were the initial 3, who also didn't have their own space for their fans. And I was like, they're going to make their own Discord, and then there's going to be Discord fragmentation, right? So I approached them and I said, do you want to be co-owners of this server, the Sudoku Solver server, instead of making your own? And that way we can combine our communities and advertising it with each other. And like that, make sure that the community is aware of everything that's going on in one place. And they loved that idea and they joined in. And so we renamed it Sudoku Solvers. We just added that S.
Mm.
And then I sort of made it a space for, I gave each creator their own space for their Patreon or YouTube members, things like that. Let's see, what am I saying? So that did that. And then at some point, like it was mostly because of Scott. Scott actually exploded in popularity because of his shorts. He reached something like 75,000 subscribers really quickly when the Wordle craze was happening.
Mm-hmm.
We got a huge influx of people. And we realized that, hey, having a bunch of word game people joining the server called Sudoku Solvers doesn't make a lot of sense. Some of the creators are transitioning to do more than just Sudoku. And so we actually brainstormed together and came up with the name Puzzle Plaza and rebranded it as that. So, and then since then, we've invited more creators in to sort of be additional creators that use the Puzzle Plaza as their sort of hub to invite their fans into and to announce stuff and interact with their fans and things like that.
Yeah, it's great. More story time. How has your perspective as a content creator changed over the years of creating content?
I think the biggest thing I've sort of transitioned into is, and I've always kind of had this sort of feeling, but I've really made it concrete, which is transitioning to being kind of a safe space. I hate to call myself a role model. I feel like that's vain, but I want to be able to be a role model, because especially with the younger audience that I attracted with the Wordle stuff, like previously, basically, like the audience was very much shifted to be my age range or older.
Mm-hmm.
But I attracted a whole bunch of younger people, um, and I was like, what can I do to try to be a good role model, to try to be a safe space, to try to be a shelter from like, if you scroll any social media or you scroll TikTok or you scroll shorts, it's people yelling at you, people wanting you to be afraid, people wanting you to um, watch their things because you're anxious, right? And they want to build that anxiety and they want to build
Hmm.
that anger and they want to build that fear. And then I want you to flip to my page and I want you to feel that calm. Things are straightforward, things are logical, things make sense. Um, there's kindness associated with that content, and realize that there is another way. Yeah, and my calming voice, I never yell, things like that. So um, just giving some comfort and shelter from the storm of stuff in your feed, and then hopefully showing, hey, there's another way to enjoy content, and push back against the sort of like, if you kind of read the stuff on like how to build your audience, it the advice is essentially what I just said, which is, grab their attention in the first couple seconds, right? And you know what a lot of that translates to is some kind of like way of grabbing their anger
Mm.
or things like that. And so that's something that I've really evolved over time and tried to transition more and more towards. Um, and a lot of the stuff like investing in my equipment, like my nice mic and my audio setup, and investigating how to like do EQ and other stuff like with audio, and then having the nice video feed and all that. Partially it's because I want to present professionally and that does help build the audience, but also it leans into me being able to uh provide that sort of experience as well. Did I answer the question? I
Yeah, I
can't
think
remember.
so. I think that's a great answer. Yeah.
Okay.
I missed a question from Palfly about adventure, so we'll come back to that. Palfly asked, "What's your favorite adventure theme week so far?"
Ooh. Um, I'm going to actually pull up the list. We have a list of past themes, so we don't accidentally repeat one. Um, so let's talk about what themes we've had. Why don't we do that? So we had Chinese Whispers. That was the first one. Um, I chose that because I feel like they're underrepresented. Even though they're a much older constraint than German Whispers. German Whispers has kind of taken over the Whisper name. And so I wanted to present that. And so I was like, what's a constraint that's straightforward that people may not have encountered before? So that was
Mm.
Chinese Whisper. So being the first theme, that does have a special place in my heart. Then we did quads. I feel like quads is probably not my favorite of them, although there were some good quad puzzles. Doublers. Doublers was fun, but the problem I had with doublers is I had to sit there and explain doublers every day for 7 days. Um, And in fact, at the time, I was pre-recording 7 adventures for the week over the weekend, and so I literally in a row, 7 videos in a row, I just sat there explaining doublers over and over again, and they're hard to explain, so it took a while each time. So I requested from then on that future theme weeks would be easier to explain. Um, I really liked December because December we decided to do another Advent, which sort of brought us back to December 2022 when I did Kinnison's Advent. Um, and so we actually did 25 holiday related puzzles, and those were all super fun. Um, Zipper was great because that was like an invention by Jay's, and Jay's joined the adventure team, and we did a Zipper theme week, which was great. Right when zippers were getting popular. Then we did Fortress, Little Killer, Counting Circles. Counting Circles is a fun one. I think that's a nice balance where it's not that hard to explain the rules to counting circles, but also there's a lot that you can explore in there.
Mhm.
So that might be one of my favorites, actually. Parody Diamonds went very well as well. A lot of coloring, which was nice. And then we just did Thermo. And the reason we did Thermo is because I had just gotten an influx of new viewers from TikTok. And I thought, what is the constraint that when I was new to solving variants that I enjoyed the most? And thermo came to mind as like, that's what a lot of new solvers sort of attach themselves to because it's easy to understand.
Right.
And so we picked Thermo Week to try to cater to a new, very new audience. So I think of those, probably I would, if I was forced to pick a favorite, which I hate doing, it would be the counting circles, just because that was a really creative one, not too hard to explain like the doublers was,
Mhm.
but we got some really, really nice puzzles out of that.
I think this is kind of related, so we'll ask this question right now. Isak N. Hodge, which I have learned is John Case backwards since the other video where I had to pronounce that 3 times. He asked, what is your favorite neglected, overlooked, underappreciated variant to set?
Ooh. You know, I just talked about Chinese whispers. It's still pretty neglected. I do think the name is slightly problematic.
Yeah. Sorry, my cat was eating something.
But that is what the children's game is generally called in the UK, which is where the original setter, I believe, was from. I don't remember who the original setter was off the top of my head, who invented it, but I think it was like over 10 years ago. And so like I think the reason that I decided to go with Chinese whispers over calling it something like telephone is historically that is what it was called. And also it has whispers in the name, which people are used to from German whispers, Dutch whispers, that sort of thing. That's where that name came from. So that's why I went with it. But I do think if I could go back in time and say, hey, please call it telephone, I would. I don't know what the German version would be called then. Maybe the German word for telephone, but that would be fun. But yeah, sometimes there's just historic things there. But I do think it is a bit of a neglected constraint. And I think most of the neglected constraints will be ones that aren't in my solver. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity now for people to make custom constraints in Sudoku Maker and distribute those, where now people can explore more of these neglected ones without me adding it to my solver. The German word is just telephone, so not too interesting.
That's a pretty bland German word for German.
Deutsch. Anyway, I don't think we need to brainstorm a new name for Chinese whispers, but mobile phone would make more fun. That's handy in German. Handy lines. I like it.
Handy lines. How often do you actually get to set puzzles these days?
I've been setting for adventure every once in a while. I've been trying to do every 50 adventures. I think I missed one, but I am trying to do that. I also recently set a puzzle for Chatty Cathy, who's sort of up and coming. She's learning Sudoku and making content, and the community has been very supportive of her. And so I thought I would make a puzzle for her as well. But honestly, like I never really set with much frequency. My catalog is actually kind of small, especially considering some of the puzzles I made, I never ended up publishing anywhere. But yeah, so I spend a lot less time setting than one might think. So I guess the answer is not very often, but I do still enjoy it.
Rom Planer had asked a kind of technical question. Why is your true candidate solver so superior in terms of its speed?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I think the kind of I hate using the word naive. When I talk about technical stuff, naive has a very specific definition that isn't the common definition. It's sort of the straightforward first thing you'd think of implementation. So the naive implementation would be to just run a full solution count and track all the solutions and then union them, which is what True Candidates is at its heart. And the problem with that is when your puzzle is very unconstrained, there's too many solutions and you're not going to be able to get the full count in a reasonable amount of time. And so the technique I use for true candidates is um, I it's basically guess and check, right? So for every I first start with a really basic logical solve. I don't get too in depth on it, but I get it down to sort of a base set of candidates. And then I go through each candidate one at a time. So like maybe one in row one, column one is still available. So I'll set it to one and then I'll just try to find a solution. And if there's no solutions, then that one can be eliminated. If there is a solution, then I grab that solution. And not only do I say, well, one is possible, but every digit in that solution is now possible and I don't have to check it.
Ah,
And then I move on to the next one that's unknown. So maybe, it would probably be the two in row one, column one. I set that. And again, just find a solution and then repeat until I'm out of candidates that I need to check.
Hmm.
And so I only need to find it's not even close to 9 cubed solutions, right? Because as I'm finding solutions, I'm also ticking those off.
right.
So like the first solution, I'm already eliminating up to 81 candidates that I have to check. And then I've also tuned the algorithm to prefer trying candidates that I don't know about yet. So it's going to prefer finding a solution that involves candidates that
Hmm.
I would have to check later. And so
Hmm.
the combination of that has made it very fast. There is actually new tech that is really interesting that involves doing a full solution count, but tree pruning. So I think that might be a little bit more technical than we can get into on this. But with that tree pruning, it's actually highly competitive with my true candidate method, and might be a nice replacement for it, depending on how that gets tuned. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. RD and DNT, or as he says here, redundant, which I didn't actually know that was what that stood for. Asked, I have to find the question after I found his name. How does your programming experience inform your setting? You talked a little bit about that at the beginning, but I guess you're now setting rather than first setting.
Let me just get a new
Yes.
cough drop here, and then we'll. That's a really interesting question because I think I've been programming since I was 10 or younger, maybe even 8 years old. I've been programming in some way, and so I feel like it shaped the way my brain. Your brain's very elastic at those young ages, and I feel like it
Mhm.
really shaped the way my brain developed into an adult, and how I approach anything that I do is very much as a programmer. And so I have a really tough time answering that question simply because um, I don't know what it's like to think as a non-programmer.
Right.
Um, and so I would say that I do take very systematic approaches to pretty much everything I do. Um, Systematic, logical approaches. But I also do rely heavily on instinct. And I think that that's something people don't really realize a lot about programming is once you really get deep into programming, it does involve a lot of instinct and intuition.
Mhm.
Kind of like, you know, when you speak your native language, you don't have to think about it.
Right.
And it's very similar with programming, where like what a lot of people think of as programming is actually typing on the keyboard and getting the code onto the screen. That's kind of the least involved. Like that is involved in programming, of course, but most of programming is thinking and planning. When you start getting into like these larger systems. And so I think that does inform a lot of my life where it's like the actual act of doing it is the culmination of having planned. So I don't start setting a puzzle until I've been ruminating on it in my head for a while and coming up with a plan and ideas of like, what constraint do I want to use? How does that work? What's an interesting thing I can do? And I just let that sort of ruminate. I really rarely sit down with no idea and just try to get something out. I have done that, and I feel like those are my worst puzzles. And so really one of the reasons that I'm not very prolific as a setter is I kind of just wait for something to come out of my head and be like, we need to set this right now. And then it becomes almost urgent to just
Mhm.
get that onto page right before I forget. And so it's very similar with programming where you can just be like, okay, I'm going to work on this programming thing next week because I need to be working on this for a week in my head,
Mm.
and then getting it out, through my fingers onto the screen is going to be just that's sort of, there's a phrase I'm looking for that I can't remember, but it's just sort of that's the rote thing, right? That's the thing that um
Yeah, I think you need to kind of make it more complicated in your head before you can get it down in its simplest form
yeah.
in someone. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to imply that I've set the entire puzzle in my
Yeah.
head before I put it out there. Just in the same way, I haven't written all the code in my head before I got there, but I have a plan and I have a general structure that I'm trying to use. I'm not one of those savants who can just like visualize a whole puzzle and just like that's not me. But I have a general idea of what I want to do before I start setting. Um, and so I think that's why I rarely have to throw out a puzzle.
Mhm.
I usually can make it work. The hardest I ever struggled was my 20 lines puzzle that I made for Zeta Math for his 200th. Was it for his 200th stream? It must have been. Because for my 100th stream, he invented 10 lines for that, and he made a puzzle for that. And so I thought I would do an homage to that for his 200th stream and create a 20 lines puzzle. 20 lines. So 10 lines are, it's a line and you have to figure out how to segment the line so that each segment adds to 10. And so 20 lines is you have to figure out how to segment the line so that each segment adds to 20. And that's a lot harder. And I tried my normal thing of just adding it to my solver, and my solver couldn't handle it. It wasn't able to solve it efficiently. And so I ended up having to do that on my own without solver support. Well, I was able to like tinker with it, like add killer cages and stuff for when I knew where I wanted the segments to be. But I kept running into problems where I thought I had proven it had to be segmented a certain way, and I added the killer cages for it, and then the puzzle was unique, and then I test solve it, and I go, oh wait, there's 3 other ways to segment this. And so that was, and I was on a deadline to get it submitted for the stream. So that was probably the hardest puzzle I ever set, but it did work out really well. And I do believe it was also featured on CTC, if I recall correctly. That might be misremembering, but I do believe Mark solved it. So, and of course, Zeta did it. So yeah, that was one of the hardest ones I ever set. I don't think that was the question, but I don't remember what the question was.
Don't remember what the question was either now. So, oh yeah, no, I think you answered it. It's I didn't put it in
As a
chat.
programmer, how I
Yes,
approach
yes,
things.
yes.
Okay.
David had asked, do you prefer to solve or create puzzles?
I definitely think I prefer solving over creating. And I think my modern sort of the way I've evolved into how I set puzzles feels a lot like solving puzzles. It's just a puzzle that hasn't been made yet.
Right.
And so that's why I'm really enjoying that way of setting. But I definitely solve way more than I set. So, and actually, I really find myself enjoying adventures, right? Enjoying those little bite-sized puzzles that I can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes on and then be done.
Mhm.
I'm really enjoying that much more than like trying to tackle like a 5-star puzzle that like Simon might do on the channel. And so I think when I was streaming, it was much more fun to like take on a challenging puzzle. But on my own, I've really I found sort of a sweet spot of difficulty that I really enjoy, and it's not 4-star. I can tell you that. Um, And so, because again, my time is super limited, right? And if I'm solving a puzzle, I prefer to be solving it in video form. So, um, when I'm solving on my own, it's usually like a quick break from work or like um, break from something else, or like I'm bored for 10 minutes, right? And so I just
Right.
want a quick puzzle to solve. And I think that I'm really providing that to a lot of people with adventure, where they're like, yeah, I just do it with my coffee in the morning, right? It's not something, it's still interesting, but it's over as soon as it's a lot of these puzzles, like they're real like super interesting right at the start, and then you still have to spend 30 minutes finishing it.
Right.
Whereas like with these little 6x6s, like they don't overstay, they're welcome, which is also enjoyable for me. So
I guess you kind of already asked the question I'm preparing to. Did I say ask? Answered the question that I'm preparing to ask. Palfi asked, do you prefer 6x6 over 9x9 for beginners, and if yes, why?
do you mind if I address a question Rocky asked in
Yeah,
chat?
absolutely.
Where can you find the adventure puzzles? So you can find them on my channel. I publish them every day. But also I did release a tracking sheet recently. So if you prefer, you can just find any of my videos on adventure. And in the description, there is a tracking sheet link, and that has every puzzle, all 500 something of them. So feel free to use the tracking sheet.
Through the playlist in the chat as well. So
yeah, okay. But to answer your question, do you prefer 6x6 over 9x9 for beginners? That's a really good question. I'm going to be a little controversial here. I think beginners should start with classic 9x9s. I think that you need to gain the basic idea of Sudoku and how to scan Sudoku before you start doing variants.
yeah.
And that's why I have that New York Times series where I solve the medium and the hard every day. And I show the sort of way to think about scanning that's fun and effective and consistent. So I think that if you don't have that baseline scanning, this is something I've seen with a lot of new people who are newer to solving variants. And I'm not singling anyone out here. It's very common is they jump into the variants and they miss a hidden single. That's actually kind of, to me, is obvious because I'm extremely practiced at scanning. And so I would say start with classic 9x9s, learn what Sudoku is, learn how to think about scanning it, get good at least the basic scanning. And the basic scanning is anything that New York Times is going to throw at you. It's just going to be stuff like different kinds of singles, different kinds of pairs and triples, pointing and claiming. That's about it. And you need those basics to be really internalized in order to be able to approach solving variants correctly and effectively. But then once you have that, I would go to 6x6s to learn how the variants work and to explore them and see which ones you like. And then start sort of interleaving in 9x9s. Or stay with 6x6s. There's no reason you have to do 9x9s, but I think that's the progression that I'd recommend.
You had mentioned before that when you sit down and try to force yourself to make a puzzle, you think those are your worst puzzles. What's your biggest puzzling regret? Are there any puzzles you'd like to redo or take back?
That's a really good question. Most of them failed before they were done. I'm trying to think of like an idea I had that just didn't work that I tried to force out. And honestly, it's not coming to mind. So I wish I could give a better answer for that. But I usually don't let a puzzle finish if it's just not working out. I usually just abandon it. So there are definitely puzzles that I regret not publishing. Like, who was it that just said?
Riff Clown.
Yeah, it was Riff Clown wants me to publish my Regents Online German Whisper puzzle, which I never published. I believe I quasi-published it by asking Bremster to solve it on his channel, and he did so. So you can find it there. But I think that the issue is I actually wrote a solve document for it in preparation for making a video, and then I just forgot to make the video. Because usually what I do is I like to publish the puzzle alongside the video. The video is available from the start.
Right.
And then I never made the video, so I never published it. And then I forgot I made the puzzle. So that might be my biggest regret. And I know it's not in line with like regret of like a puzzle I attempted to make and failed. I just don't remember. I do. There is another regret I can think of, which is I made several puzzles for Jessica's birthday for her 40th. My sister Jessica. And one of them, I really liked it. It was my first attempt at making a hybrid uh, Sudoku / pencil puzzle. So it involved a lot of shading. I think I did cave. So I combined cave with variant Sudoku, and I was really proud of it. And Mark ended up featuring it, and he called it the Sudoku for people who don't like Sudoku. And that, I was really heartbroken by that title. He didn't seem to enjoy it, and so I feel like I don't know. I did something wrong with that puzzle to give him that impression. I think maybe you could learn a bit too much from the cave, and you didn't have to do as much Sudoku. Was maybe the problem, but I still really liked the puzzle. But that was probably one that I sat down and I was like, I don't have an idea, but I know I want to sort of do a shading puzzle so I can have a picture. And that puzzle was a bit forced out because again, anytime I have a deadline, like my sister's 40th birthday or Zeta Math's 200 stream, right? That's when it's like, oh, I have a deadline. I sort of cut corners or skip a lot of the testing process or am unwilling to sort of backtrack and take more time on it. And so those end up not as good, but I still like the puzzle as much as Mark did. But
sorry, cat.
Ooh, kitty.
Been a while since the cat feature. Is there any feature in setting puzzles like scripts and stuff that you've always sort of wanted to implement but never got around to it, or it isn't super clear to you how you would implement it, or it doesn't like work with the current tools?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the solver. One of the areas that I wanted to focus on a lot more was the logical solver. I think there's a lot of really neat techniques that are used in classic Sudoku solvers like YZF, which my solver can't do. Like, I would like it if my solver were able to logically solve any puzzle that it has supported constraints for, including difficult classics. And the problem but what I'd like to do is do them in a generic way so that they interact in interesting ways with the variants, the variant constraints that are involved. And the issue that I ran into is basically, even as a setter myself, I don't want a really powerful logical solver. I like the true candidates. I like the brute force solver to tell me the answer of like, how constrained is my puzzle? Does my puzzle still work? If I place this clue, will it break things? I like that. But I don't like it telling me the solve path. I want to make the solve path, right? Because I think a computer generated solve path is not going to be what humans are going to do anyway, no matter how hard I try. And so why would I focus on all of this logical solving stuff? Even though I would intellectually find it fascinating and I think it would be really fun to implement, I think that I have sort of a responsibility to setters to implement the features that are going to be useful, both for myself and others. And I have limited time to work on it, so I have to prioritize. So I've very much deprioritized improving the logical solver. I think another aspect of that, which actually would also help the brute force solver, so it is something I want to look into, but has been very difficult, is interactions between individual constraints. Like, a super common complaint is there's outies to this set of killer cages. That's super obvious, but the solver doesn't find it. And the reason for that is it doesn't look for it, right? So, and that can actually harm the ability to solve the puzzle quickly, even in brute force, because it's not finding the super obvious outies. And so it's exploring a bunch of possibilities that don't work and not figuring out why they don't work. So I think those are two major holes, is like, I think I answered the question. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think I'd pick those two.
What do you think of the overwhelming power of like true candidates and how sometimes less experienced setters might get something that has a unique solution but no solve path and then just throw it out there to the world for other people to suffer? What do you think of that unfortunate consequence of these tools?
Oh yeah. I would be the first to tell you not to lean on true candidates too much. Uh, as the inventor of them, at least again, I don't know that I am the first inventor of it, but I am a inventor of it because I hadn't seen it before. So I don't know if that makes sense. In fact, I feel like my solver, not to toot my own horn, and I could be wrong, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong. But in my mind, at least, the novel idea of my solver was being able to solve puzzles that aren't already unique. Um, and being an assistant to setting rather than an assistant to solving. Because a lot of these solvers, they come from the perspective of, I was presented this puzzle, I need help solving it.
Right.
And so they only work if the puzzle is already unique. Whereas my tooling was created that from the perspective of we're basically done once the puzzle's unique. Although I will about to say no, you're not. But basically, like for most of your setting of the puzzle is not unique, and the solver needs to understand that there are certain things you still want to know about the puzzle, even though it's not unique.
Mm.
And so, I will say that true candidates can be used to great effect, but they can also ruin your puzzle. Because if you're just placing clues until true candidate says it's unique, that means you're not understanding the puzzle you're making. It may as well have been made by a computer. And computer generated puzzles aren't that fun. They don't have a path, right? True candidates don't tell you the path. And sometimes, especially with weird constraints, the true candidates are going to do weird things that you don't understand. And my tip is always, if you cannot explain why true candidate says this digit's not possible, keep setting with the assumption in mind that that candidate is possible. Just don't try to force that candidate to be true because you'll break your puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really what I designed true candidates for. If you remember, the very first puzzles I was making were non-consecutive puzzles, stuff with really powerful global constraints, where you can place 4 givens in the top left and the entire puzzle's unique, but there's no way you're going to be able to solve that. And so what true candidates allows you to do is avoid the situation where you added a clue and you don't find out until 30 minutes later that that clue you added broke the puzzle. That's the real power of it. And so having that display of understanding of like, okay, when I'm thinking about what clue to add to continue my puzzle setting journey here on this puzzle, don't place that clue because it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what it helps you with. Or if I place this clue, it'll be very powerful. Let me try to figure out why. And do I want a powerful clue right now? Or do I want a weak clue? Right? And that can help inform you of your choices. But once you've been informed of your choices, now it's up to you to go back, ignore the true candidates, and pick the choice that seems to work best for your puzzle, or explore
Right.
the different choices yourself. So that would be my advice in terms of how to effectively use true candidates without having it, harm your puzzle.
Is there any other pieces of setting advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think I kind of touched on it, but I think I'll just make it concrete, which is my setting advice is set like you solve. And I think this is very common advice. This is what I really enjoy. Okay, first, I see this all the time, and I hate pushing back against it because I want people to make puzzles that they love, that they want to set. But I will say that if you're trying to get into setting, often the instinct is to want to make the next miracle Sudoku, to want to use really powerful constraints like anti-night, non-consecutive. And I'm speaking from someone who did start that way
Mm-hmm.
and saying I transitioned away from it for a reason. And it really helped my setting to do so, which is pick weak constraints,
Mm-hmm.
pick local constraints that have local effects, and place them in a way that you have an idea of what they're going to do, and then explore that and find bits of interesting logic that you want to preserve and reward. So it's always preserve the interesting thing and reward finding it, and just do that in a loop. That's how I set these days, and I think it's very effective. And it makes for a puzzle that flows, that feels like it's taking you on a journey, And it just gives you these interesting moments one after another that feel rewarding. Because how as a solver, I always feel bad when like I find this really cool piece of logic that eliminates a one candidate, and then you go, what now? It didn't do anything. It's like I'm really proud of that thing I found, but it didn't do anything. And now I have to find something else. Right.
Mhm.
And so I like to immediately reward cool moments like that. And I think the solver can help you identify whether there's a cool moment available as well. And so that can help inform it. But if you can't figure out why it's saying that this thing's limited in this way, that means it's not a cool moment. That means it's a trap. Don't try to use that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think I've said to someone before about the solver, like with great power comes great responsibility. You're responsible for the
yes,
solver's experience. Don't mess it up.
yes, exactly.
Rom Planer had asked a question which I don't understand, but maybe you can help me out here. He asked,
Sure.
why can't my little brain fully understand the answer to quote, one dot question mark upside down smiley face?
Why can't my little brain fully understand the answer to one dot?
Is this a reference to another question, perhaps?
It might be.
That might be the
I mean, I can
case.
talk about a one dot puzzle, but I highly doubt that that's what Ron Planner's referencing. But it's interesting.
It must be.
So to their first question. So what was Ron Planner's first question?
Oh, why is your true candidate solver so superior in terms of speed? Oh, okay. It was just preemptively assuming that they wouldn't understand the answer. Okay, okay. Sorry,
Well, I hope my explanation made sense to a non-programmer. So I think the way to think about true candidates is you're basically this touches on something I just said, which is most Sudoku solvers are designed to only work on puzzles with a unique solution, right? Um, and so you have to kind of come at it with a different perspective when you're talking about true candidates, because the true candidates of a puzzle with one solution is the solution. So
right.
true candidates only make sense within the realm of puzzles that aren't unique yet. And so if you think about a puzzle that's not unique yet, there could be multiple options per cell of a candidate that will still arrive at a solution, but there are definitely candidates per cell that do not arrive yet at a solution. So how do you discover which ones arrive at solutions, which ones don't? Well, you set that candidate to true and you try to solve it, right? And so if you get no solution, then that candidate's not possible. So I hope that that's understandable to a layperson. Um, People in
I,
chat are curious about the one dot puzzle. Um, are you? I don't know how set up you are. Are you able to bring up enough puzzles with my solver, or is that way too much to ask?
with your solver, I don't think I have it formatted for that.
If it's too much to ask, then I'll just describe it. But
Oh yeah, okay, maybe you just describe it, and then we'll see if I
so, are
can
you able to
figure
just
something out.
bring up any Sudoku grid, or
Oh yeah, I can bring up F photos.
and this is not my discovery. Um, and I forget who to credit. My brain wants me to credit Clover, but I hate miscrediting also. So take that with a grain of salt. Um, okay, so if you have both non-consecutive and anti-ratio on, and you place a black dot between row 6, column 8, and row 7, column 8. Yep. That puzzle's unique.
disgusting.
Yeah. No one's ever been able to figure out how to solve it, but it is unique. The crazy thing is, if you replace the black dot with a white dot, it's still unique and it's the same solution.
Oh, that's really. I remember hearing about this. I think you might be right. It's either Clover or it's Sam.
Jovial.
It's Jovi. Okay.
I think Jovi. Yeah, it's Jovi. Yeah. My apologies to Jovi. So yeah, and of course there's symmetrical.
Jovi would think this is
for it.
really gross, so I'm not sure if it's Jovi, but
Jovi was whoever it was just playing around with the solver and just like flunking stuff,
right,
and just
yeah.
found it and thought it was interesting. Didn't publish it as a puzzle, of course.
Of course.
Theory programming. Anyone who publishes that as a puzzle is asking for very angry people, because you can't solve it. Like, I don't know how you would even approach solving that. So anyway, I think you might be able to make a puzzle out of it, because you can always add other constraints on top of it.
I'm sure someone
which is how
accidentally made that puzzle.
Maybe. But yeah, what blows my mind is the fact that the black dot and the white dot both are unique and are the same solution. It's just because it's a 1-2 across it. I don't know if ambiguous dot solves it. Okay, it was jovial. Okay, good to know.
Okay.
You would think an ambiguous dot would also work, but it's not guaranteed, right? I don't think it's guaranteed to work as an ambiguous dot.
How does that work with the negative constraint, though?
So basically what you're doing with an ambiguous dot is you're inverting the negative constraint across those cells, right? Because the a white dot or a black dot disables the negative constraint.
Right.
Both negative constraints across it. I had to make that a special case in my solver. So that you can put 1-2 across black dots.
All right, we should do rapid fire questions before we run out of time. So one option or the other, as quickly as you can.
Okay.
All right, high lowity or odd evenity?
Odd even.
Local or global deductions?
Local.
Coloring or good living?
Coloring.
Simple or complex?
Simple.
Favorite digit to dance to?
Ooh, I don't really do the digit dance thing. I'm gonna pick 5.
Okay. Geometry or arithmetic?
Geometry.
Penpa, F puzzles, Sudoku Maker, or something else?
F puzzles with my solver is still my go-to.
Sudoku or pencil puzzles?
Sudoku.
Chaos or order?
Order.
Big or little?
Little.
Digital or analog?
Digital.
Cages or lines?
Lines.
Arrows or dots?
Arrows.
Indexers or chess constraints?
Ooh. Indexers.
To disambiguate a puzzle, a given or an extra rule?
Given.
Outside or inside clues?
Inside.
Cheese or bread?
Cheese.
Good or evil?
Good.
Lawful or chaotic?
Lawful.
Okay, that's all the rapid fire questions. I'm always surprised every time someone says cheese, and it's happened almost every interview.
If I had to remove cheese or bread from my diet, I would pick cheese. I would pick to remove bread, not cheese.
Yeah, it's a hard
I don't
pick,
think I would.
But...
I would live without cheese, even though I'm lactose intolerant.
Same. It makes you value it more. What kind of cheese? Yeah, that's a great question, David.
Sharp cheddar. The sharper, the better. I could eat sharp cheddar cubes just straight. Just.
Uh,
I only answered differently from Brentster 3 times. I wonder what those 3 were. Interesting. One thing I wanted to, there was one rapid fire I wanted to expand on,
yeah, for sure.
which was simple versus complex. And this is another thing that comes from programming, which is you make complex things out of simple parts. You always want to break down your problem into manageable pieces that seem simple. And if you can do that, then the entire thing is simple. So if you think of something as complex, then that makes it much harder to tackle. And it also adds a barrier to wanting to tackle it. Whereas if you can break the problem down into simple components, you go, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And if you just write that down and plan it out first, then you can tackle any problem.
That sounds eerily similar to my teaching philosophy.
I think it's a good philosophy. I didn't invent it, but I do subscribe to it.
Wisteria had asked a question, which I almost missed. You're a really strong solver. How does one improve their solving abilities?
So I think I want to give a generic answer to how do I improve at something in general? And this works for me, and I cannot speak for anyone else other than myself, but I like to try to challenge myself against something that's harder than I can do currently. But so to talk about something completely different, when I was playing StarCraft, I much preferred playing against people who didn't let me get away with mistakes. I wanted to play against people who are better than me, and that made me quickly improve, because if I made a mistake, the game was over, and then we go into the next game, right? As long as it's someone who's kind to you and is willing to tell you, hey, here's what you did wrong, then you can learn. And then also just surrounding myself with people who are better than me. I never want to be the smartest person in the room, if that's at all optional, if that's an option. Because I always want to be learning. And of course, there are people who are smarter than you, always smarter than you at one thing, right? You're not the smartest in the room for everything. So I want them to teach me that thing that they're better than me at. So I think just immersing yourself around and within a community where you can learn is the best way to do that. And that applies to Sudoku and anything else in life.
Yeah, I agree. With innovations like Fog of War, etc., how do you see puzzles evolving in the future?
Fog of War is really interesting because I think it's the very first constraint that's digital only. Like you can't really do Fog of War. There are some workarounds with like stickers and stuff, but to be honest, like you're not going to publish a Sudoku book that has Fog of War in it. And so I think we're going to start seeing more of like what Chameleon's been doing with his software. I'm sorry, I assumed you were he, him, and I don't actually know. So correct me if I'm wrong. But what Chameleon's doing with their software is really embracing the digital aspect of it and making it feel more like a game, where the computer knows things you don't. And you're like, fog is also one of the first constraints that I've seen in Sudoku, where it's not a full information game from the start. So I think that's going to be explored more, where things are revealed to you as you solve, rather than it being a full information from the start thing. So like instead of chess, it might be poker, right? Where chess is a full information game, whereas poker, you have information hidden from you, but you can still use strategy to progress.
Sudoku with betting. That's where we're headed.
Well, Zeta's already doing that one.
I bet this cell will be a 5, and if it's wrong, then the puzzle's different. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Givens actually come out of nowhere. I mean, that's kind of what Fog is doing, but yeah. I think there's gonna be more of that and that's really going to depend on people like Chameleon and Sven and others who are building these solving softwares, with generic support for stuff like that. I think it's going to be really important to progress sort of the digital Sudoku age.
So we were talking a little bit about, before we jumped on stream, about the different audiences that you have and how a bunch of the YouTube shorts people aren't watching the long form content and stuff. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I have 100,000 subscribers, but I call it undeserved to an extent because though they aren't watching my videos, they're just subscribed. I would say 90,000 of them come from 3 shorts. There's a single short I can point at, which got me 33,000 subscribers on its own. So, but they haven't watched any of my other shorts. They haven't watched any of my other content. So I think it's much more important to be looking at the community that's coming back over and over again and embracing the people who are regulars, the people who are enjoying your content day to day and growing that community. I find that much more important than a number next to the name. Although I do enjoy having that check mark. I think it's fun. And it shouldn't, but the fact that that number gives me the check mark and is at that high number, 100,000, it does allow me to have a larger voice because people are like, oh, this is someone to listen to because they have that novelty. So I'd like to take advantage of that to help out the community and to expand the community as best as I can. One thing that I'm a bit more proud of is actually I did just recently hit 50,000 followers on TikTok, and they are actually, a lot of them are actually watching my videos day to day. So I'm enjoying building that TikTok community as well. Yeah, I know. I produce too many videos for anyone to reasonably watch all of them, and that's another problem I have. But maybe try 2x. I sound really smart at 2x, so I don't mind you watching at 2x. I think really quickly when you speed it up.
Is there anything that really annoys you about something setters do or puzzles in general? Like, is there a puzzling pet peeve that you have?
I hate to talk badly about puzzles, and I don't want anyone to think that this is singling out any particular puzzle because I honestly can't think of a particular one. But in general, when the break-ins are just too opaque, right, and too required. Again, I've been preferring the sort of 2-3 star area of difficulty, and I feel like when the break-in is too clever, it's more of a showing off than being being nice to the solver. I don't know if that makes sense, but sort of that's kind of my pet peeve. It's the difficulty creep that's happening, especially on LMD and on CTC.
Yeah, I think
where
I can't remember who said this now for some reason, but puzzles that make you feel the solvers feel smart rather than the setter feel smart.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a really good way to put that. I wish you could credit who said it, but I completely agree. You want the solver to feel smart. You don't want them to think you're smarter than them, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great pet peeve. It's not really that negative.
Well, I think that there are a lot of people who enjoy those difficult break-ins, and that's the kind of puzzles they like to solve, and I think that that's perfectly fine, but that's not who I cater to as a setter myself, and that's not me as a solver either. So. Yeah, an adventure is even struggling with difficulty creep, where I have to keep pushing back and saying, hey, these puzzles are getting too hard, make them easier. Because it's actually, I think it's harder to make an interesting puzzle that's easy than an interesting puzzle that's hard.
Yeah.
And if you can make an interesting puzzle that's easy, that's something that more people are going to enjoy.
For sure. Do you have any tips for making those kinds of puzzles?
One idea and then get out. Right? Maybe repeat that same idea 3 times, making it a little bit harder each time. Right? but one idea and then the puzzle's done. And that's what 6x6s are great at.
Mhm.
And that idea should be accessible. Like if you can teach them what the idea is while they solve it, that's amazing. I can't ask that of every setter. That takes a lot. But those are the best puzzles. That the puzzles that literally teach you how to do the break-in, and then it's done, and you just feel really good about yourself for learning that and solving it.
I guess this is kind of similar to the pet peeve question, or maybe similar to that answer. But what makes you want to solve a puzzle versus not want to solve it?
Oh, I think first impressions are really important. I think there's sort of two levels to that question, because if a puzzle involves constraints I'm used to, I'm much more willing to just dive in and try it, especially if I can look at it and immediately go, oh, this is how that's interacting. Let me just plunk that in and then see where things go. Um, I think if it's a really like creative rule set, I definitely want to encourage people to be exploring that, but I'm less likely to jump into that if I don't trust the setter.
Mhm.
So, and I hate to say that, but like those feel like a much more time slash cognitive investment to them. And at where I am right now, I have difficulty doing that investment if I don't know there's going to be a payoff to it. And so, like, if it's someone like, just to pick a random name who everyone knows, if it's someone like Zeta I'm basically going to trust, okay, it's a Zeta puzzle. There's going to be payoff to it. Whereas if it's someone I've never seen before, maybe they're like, hey, this is my first puzzle and it uses this rule I invented. I'm like, I'll let other people test that first before I touch it. It's unfortunate, but you kind of have to earn, the eyes, right?
Mhm.
Um, you have to earn the solves by proving yourself as a setter before you start making these puzzles that are just have these crazy rule sets.
Yeah, for sure. If it's someone, if it's someone completely new and their puzzle is ridiculous, sometimes I'll just even say like, "Okay, just tell me what you were trying to do, because I don't know what you were doing or what is happening here, but I can help you try to do what you're trying to do. It's not this, whatever this is."
Yeah. Right. I think a lot of people think they need to start their setting career with a grand idea that'll
Yeah.
impress everybody. But I think you should start your setting career with yet another German whisper puzzle, right?
Oh, not German whisper, but anything else, please.
Anything else? Just an example. Well,
Yes.
a constraint that's well known.
Mhm.
Get your feet wet, earn your stripes, and then people will be more willing to try your crazier ones. Riffclown says when the rules take longer than the puzzle.
Well, if the puzzle took a very short time, then that'd be good.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
All right, we're a minute or 2 minutes out. Is there any question that you haven't been asked yet that you want to be asked and your answer to it?
How do I find Ranks' other content? Oh, well, glad you asked. I'm on YouTube, just at Rangsk. I am on TikTok at Rangsk_YT. I also have I have a bunch of channels on TikTok, but that's where you can start. And you might enjoy the adventure series, so go seek that out as well on my channel. So I'd love to see more people solving adventure puzzles. I think it's an amazing series, and it only takes 5 minutes of your time every day. And I think you're going to really enjoy them. And it's by setters you've heard of and trust. So, yeah, thanks for asking that.
Yeah. That was my next question. So
Okay,
that's okay.
there we go. Well, I answered it already.
Yeah,
So.
ahead of the game. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ranks, for coming on. This was enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely. I always enjoy talking about myself.
Yes, and thank you everyone for coming out. Feel free to like the stream, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and all that. Jazz, and go check out Ranks if somehow you're here but you don't know who Ranks is. That would be weird, but if you don't, then go check out his TikTok and YouTube and all that. Great videos, great content, solid adventures. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks, everyone.
somehow I forgot to tell Ranks who the next interviewee is, but I need to do that so that he can announce it. So I'm going to do that. And then you can announce it. My bad.
All right, drum roll. The next interviewee is Analytical Ninja. So when is that going to be?
That will be early July.
Okay, so look out for that one in early July.
All right, goodbye, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.